In 2014, the saga of white superiority began to take shape and decided to abuse each avenue open to them merely to abuse an individual and his much vaunted constitutional rights to their merriment. After all, white sense of superiority had given them a free hand to lynch and drag black men to their death, though no crime was ever proven to having been committed by the innocent. It still happens in the state of Georgia. White men in their 70s and 80s are still being arrested for dragging black men to their death through dragging them behind their trucks merely from rumor that he or they were courting white women. The perpetrators are the perpetrators of some of the most heinous of crimes in the history of the United States of America were granted a presumed sense of sovereign immunity. To date, they believe they are immune from guilt by prosecution. In Macon Superior Court, Assistant Attorney General Brennan, in front of Superior Court Judge, stated, which you're going to see in the transcript of the court case, that Judge Monroe quietly listened to this narrative. Judge Monroe is what you will describe as African American. People like Oprah Winfrey say, well, either you're black or you're white, what the hell is this African American? So he's black. He's a black man. She stood there. She had no defense. And yet she alleged and she accused me of causing pain to these old gentlemen in their times of retirement. These old white gentlemen can only be described as the scum of the earth. Vile, vulgar scum of the earth. She stood there brazen as she described them as victims. Though she knew, because why am I alleging this? Her predecessors, Senior Assistant Attorney General Turnus and Assistant Attorney General Patsy Cohen and his company volunteered that after deposition it became abundantly clear that Mr. Brig Zimmerman, the Executive Director of Georgia Licensing Board for Professional Counselors, Marriage and Family Therapists and Social Workers, was lying through his teeth. So did Tommy Black, Dr. Tommy Black, who was the chairperson in 2014. They all lied under oath, and there is Miss Brennan accusing me of causing harm and distress to poor white men. The very same white men that are still being arrested for lynching of innocent people. There is no shame, there is no decency, there is no iota of morality in this so-called Department of Law. It was described by two former attorneys general as incompetent, filth-throwing, let's put it mildly. They have neither competence nor decency. They file their motions through Hail Marys and throwing shit at you, hoping something will stick. This is described by a former Attorney General. That's what monkeys do in the zoo. In the zoo, they throw their feces at you. That's what they do. I have absolutely no idea by now what the hell I'm dealing with it. This time, in every which way possible, inclusive of the Georgia Judiciary, Department of Defecation. Oh, I apologize. Miss Cohen, I'm apologizing. And it's not anti-Semitic. Department of Law began to leave a trail of stupidity, incompetence, and corruption with surplus of evidence to prove their client's guilt. Mr. Zimmerman, Dr. Tommy Black, take due note. At the end of the deposition, Dr. Tommy Black, he was walking past Senior Assistant Attorney General Turnus and Assistant Attorney General Betsy Cohen when he uttered those immortal words. Taking into consideration he had been prepped by the two employees of the Department of Law, Georgia, for weeks, how to deflect from giving honest answers. Remember, mental health practitioners are governed by the Code of Ethics, as is the National Board for Certified Counselors, who very clearly state that if you don't adhere with the Code of Ethics, you will suffer the consequences. So, thus far, let's gather a few bits and pieces together. From Judge Jackson to Judge Phipps, Judge Dillard, Judge Peterson, who is sitting in Supreme Court now, that is the Supreme Court of the state of Georgia, Assistant Attorneys General, numerous, members of Licensing Board, their executive director, they all lied under oath without fear of consequence. They have suffered nothing. God rest his soul, Dr. Arthur Williams. He confided in a friend of his who happens to be an acquaintance of mine, Dr. Kevin Freeman, when he said, I have no idea why these people, they are hell-bent on making life difficult for Mr. Butt. That is I. Mr. Freeman, or Dr. Kevin Freeman of Grace Harbor, voluntarily told me this because him and the late Dr. Williams were close friends from Mercer. And Dr. Freeman's name had been forwarded for appointment to the Georgia Licensing Board for licensed professional counselors, marriage and family therapists, and social workers. And Dr. Freeman promised me that when he got there, he was that sure he will get there. He will investigate everything. Needless to say, Dr. Freeman never made it. Hence the saga continues. Offer, acceptance, consideration formulate the tenets of a contract which is binding in law and thereby agreed upon. So said Dean Sobelson at Georgia State College of Law, members of Fayette Bar, judges, and all associated with education and practice in law, even the rats and the fleas. They know it. If a first-year law student did not know that, then I shall have him removed from the course, stated Dean Sobelson in no uncertain terms, and he is a man of integrity and held in the highest regard in all circles. This is extremely important to remember all through the podcasts, because it opened my eyes wide open to the corruption within practice of law and the control of the executive in the state of Georgia. Well, not so, said Judge Asha Jackson, and then the appeals court, inclusive of Phipps, Dillard, and Peterson. Jackson, Peterson, and Dillard applied for the vacant post on Georgia Supreme Court, not at the same time. Dillard and Peterson, they did that in 15. Jackson did 2 years thereafter. Through somebody that I was having a conversation with, he served on one of the committees. And having heard that this is the very same Jackson who made that court order, that notorious court order, he promised he will do anything to have that vermin removed from the list. That was the least he could do. As for the glorification of the state Supreme Court, they even denied me certiorari. Clearly, the proof was provided through their own website. And all and mighty and breathing and living, inclusive of Defendant National Board for Certified Counselors, who stated unequivocally on their website that a contract exists between the candidate and the examiner in black and white on their own website. You will see a narrative of the hearing that took place in front of Judge Jackson, including when she said the immortal words, oh, you didn't understand that. And never in my life have I seen 3 heads move with such speed towards the source from where the noise was coming. The 3 ladies sitting below in the courthouse, inclusive of her personal assistant and the court clerks. I thought their necks would have snapped at the speed which they moved, and they looked flabbergasted as to what were these noises that came out of Judge Jackson's mouth. And then she says to me condescendingly, oh, so you didn't understand that. I have no idea that Louisiana University taught their JDs this foreign language, which is some kind of legal linguistics that people such as I are supposed to know. Mind boggles, because I have no answer. Usually I do have answer for most things. Governor Nathan Deal and their staff were repeatedly kept and made aware of this egregious abuse of office and due legal processes. Before the penny finally dropped, at my meeting with the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee of Georgia, Mr. Willard Wendell, and that was a moment of comedy in itself, where the mighty king, who sat 6 feet above me before coming down to the ground level, stated, you know, I have to run it by the governor's office, and like you said, all things get buried there, but that's all I can do. My state representative, Deborah Basemore, was present. She had organized the meeting. Her legal assistant was present. So was Chairman Wendell's assistant. And I will give you the narrative of that meeting at some other given time, because I'm not going to leave anything out. Soon thereafter, he became unavailable. He had left politics. He's back practicing law. Deborah Bazemore, state representative Deborah Bazemore, became unavailable for the next 6 months while I pursued. Her executive assistant was not too amused at the demeanor of Representative Bazemore, till she called me 6 months later to say I was involved in an accident and I will be putting all energy towards my recuperation. And that was the end of the matter. I could go to hell, literally. Willard Wendell had left the building. Mr. Alexander Fleming, okay, I don't know where Alexander came from because they all sound alien to me. The chair who took over while Mr. Wendell had gone, despite numerous messages and advice given by the state politicians to make contact with him to follow up on what Mr. Wendell had done and how far the Senate Judiciary Committee had moved with my complaint, they all disappeared into thin, stinking Georgia polluted air. That's what good people do. Go down the toilet because that's where they come from. Human fecal matter. When putting everything together, excuse me, putting all facts together, it became abundantly clear that all strings were being pulled from the gubernatorial office. Nathan Deal's office. Chris Riley. He instigated everything in the gubernatorial office. Media repeatedly stated that he did everything, but Nathan Deal was kept aware of anything and everything. So we'll let it rest there.